can be seated. Welcome again to Family Church. My name is Jimmy Scroggins, and I am glad to be able to speak about the Word of God to you and with you this morning. And so we're going to have our Bible study. So why don't you go ahead and get your Bibles out, turn your Bibles on, grab a Bible from the pew in front of you, and open up to the book of 1 Samuel chapter 17. It's in the Old Testament. If you're not used to finding things in the Bible, you're new to church, you're not good at this, it's okay. Use the table of contents, use your Google search on your device, ask the person next to you for help, but get a Bible out, open up. And I'd also encourage you to get one of those programs you got when you came in, and there's some white space on there, some fill in the blanks, and we'll take notes. And I would encourage you to get in the habit of writing things down when you have a Bible study. Now, today I'm going to talk about the story of David and Goliath. How many of you have ever heard the story of David and Goliath? Would you just raise your hand? I'm pretty sure we're near 100%. I mean, even people who aren't Christians at all, people who don't go to church at all, everybody's somewhat familiar with the story of David and Goliath. It's iconic. It's legendary. So people talk about that story all the time. Even secular authors write books about it. People paint paintings about it throughout history. You can go to any museum, any reputable art museum in the world, there's probably some picture of David and Goliath or something that happened in the life of David. But what I want to talk to you about this morning is this idea that when you face the things that life is going to put in front of you, if you are a Christian, if you're a believer in Jesus, you've received Jesus by faith, crucified on the cross and raised from the dead, then you should march into those challenges and those difficulties, not with fear, but with tremendous confidence. Not confidence because you are sure how things are going to turn out. You have no idea how things are going to turn out. Just because you're a Christian, it doesn't mean everything turns out the way that you want. A lot of things in life will not turn out the way that you want, even if you're a Christian. But it means that we walk into these situations, we have big decisions to make, big conflicts that we're facing, big challenges that we're dealing with. We walk into these situations with absolute confidence that God is on our side, that God is for us, that God is with us. And that's what I want you to ask yourself this question, because all of you are facing something with a child, with your health, with your finances, with your career, with a decision that you have to make, with a sin that you're wrestling with. All of us have things that we're facing. And how would your life change? How would you address this or feel differently if you had absolute confidence that God was on your side? That could change everything. And if you're a Christian, I want you to believe that. That's what David had. David in this story, now David didn't have this in every episode in his life, but in this story, David shows us what it looks like when a man is absolutely confident that God is on his side. Let's read the text of scripture. Here we go. Guys, this is more scripture. This is a lot. Lot of Bible verses. I would apologize to you, except for that's what we do. So here we go. 1 Samuel chapter 17, starting in verse 1. Here's what the word of God says. Now, the Philistines, that's the enemies of Israel, the Philistines gathered their armies for battle. And they were gathered at Succoth, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Succoth and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. And you're like, how do you know how to pronounce that? I'm totally making this up. I have no idea. No idea whatsoever. Verse 2, and Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up in line of battle against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side with a valley between them. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion. Everybody say champion. It's important. A champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. We're going to pause right there. I don't know how much a cubit is. I don't know how much a span is. We think he was somewhere between 7 and 9 feet tall. Bottom line is, this guy's huge. Okay, so when you think giant, not Jack and the Beanstalk giant, like Godzilla size, big man though, okay? And he's called a champion. And before we read on, I just want to make a little comment, because this Hebrew word for champion actually means a man who stands between two things. A man who stands between two things. He's a champion because he's standing between the two armies and he's making a challenge. I want you to remember that. Verse 5. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistine said, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Okay, now, he's out there defying. You got to understand, when this Philistine giant defies Israel and Israel's army, the Philistine giant is defying God. The Philistine is saying that his God is greater than Israel's God. He's saying that he is greater than anyone in Israel. It is a God-on-God battle. It's not just man on man. It's God on God, army on army, worldview on worldview. It is a culture clash. You talk about the culture war. This is culture war, but with real blood and real steel. Now, David, we know about David, right? What was anybody remember the hometown of David? Remember where he lived? What was that? Yeah, he lived in Bethlehem, right? So everybody say Bethlehem out loud. All right, so I'm gonna ask you again. You can do better. Ready? What was David's hometown? It was the town of? Yeah, and you know Bethlehem because there's another famous person born there a few hundred years later. His name was? Yeah, if you're like, okay, it was Jesus, right. So David lived in Bethlehem with his dad, Jesse, and he had a bunch of brothers. David was the youngest of all of the brothers in Jesse's house. And this field in Elah, where they're about to have this fight, was only a few miles away from Bethlehem. Now, the older brothers are actually in Saul's army. So they're away from home, a few miles away from home, preparing to fight the Philistines. Jesse, the dad, sends David, the youngest boy, too young to be in the army, he sends him to take some food to his brothers and to check on them to make sure his brothers were okay. Now, some of you are like, that's kind of weird that a dad would do that. I don't know. How many of you have ever either been in the military or you had a child in the military? Would you just raise your hand? Raise your hand high, right? Been in the military, had a child in the military. So a bunch of us. Okay, if you've ever been in the military, I guarantee you your parents were worrying and thinking about you every day. When you were in boot camp, if you were deployed, if you were on some other place in the world. Because I know, because we're army parents, Chris and I are. And when James was in boot camp, we were thinking about him every day. We're writing him letters every day. When he's on the other side of the world, we want to talk to him or write him a letter. Like, we're thinking, where is he? So Jesse's just a few miles away. He can't resist the temptation. He gets his youngest son. He says, here, take some food to your brothers, check on them, come back and tell me how they're doing. Verse 20, and David rose early in the morning and left the sheep, because he was a shepherd, left the sheep with a keeper. Remember this now. He rose up early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, and took the provisions and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the encampment as the host was going out to the battle line, shouting the war cry. And Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. And David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage and ran to the ranks and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, behold, the champion, the one who stands between the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before, and David heard him. All the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were much afraid. And the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches and will give him his daughter and make his father's house free in Israel. That means they would never have to pay taxes ever again. And David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away this reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Everything comes down to circumcision in the Bible. Old Testament, New Testament. Sorry about that. That he should defy the armies of the living God. And the people answered him in the same way, so it shall be done to the man who kills him. Now, Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. So David basically makes it known that he's willing to fight with Goliath. It ticks off his oldest brother, Eliab, who makes fun of him in front of the older soldiers. So verse 31, when the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul. Saul's the king. And he sent for him, and David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go out and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are but a youth. And he's been a man of war from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep sheep for his father. You get that? Your servant used to keep sheep for his father. And when there came a lion or a bear and took a lamb from the flock, I went after him and struck him and delivered it out of his mouth. If he arose against me, I caught him by his beard and struck him and killed him. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. You hear that? Lions and bears. Verse 40. Then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand. He approached the Philistine, and the Philistine moved forward and came near to David with his shield bearer in front of him, 2 on 1. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. And the Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, come to me. I give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword and a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that this assembly may know that the Lord saves, not with sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. Well, you know what happened. There's no plot twist today, guys. It's the story that you know. David runs towards the Philistine. He throws the stone with his sling. First shot hits him right in the forehead, knocks him down. David runs over to the Philistine. Everybody's freaking out. They can't believe what's happening. David grabs the sword out of Goliath's own sheath. He takes it up and he cuts off Goliath's head. And I'm going to use a little Scroggins' imagination. I think after he cuts off his head, I think he grabs him by the hair, and I think he holds up the head, and I think he looks at the Philistines, and I think he does something like this. Yeah! Something like that. So, because that's what I would do in my mind if that happened. Verse 54. So anyway, he cuts off his head, and then the Israelites get all fired up, and now it's the Philistines who are afraid. So the Israelites come out of their battle lines, they chase down the Philistines, they slaughter them, they massacre them, they win the battle, and it all happens because God used David to kill Goliath. verse 54. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem. I don't know what they did with it. I don't know if they put it in a museum, if they put it on a pike, I don't know what they did. But he put his armor in his tent. What can we learn from this story? Is that a great story or is that a great story? It's tremendous. Okay, what can we learn? If you're taking notes, here's the number one thing I want you to learn from this text. I think all of us can learn. Number one, the battle belongs to the Lord. The battle belongs to the Lord. I want you to know whatever battle you're facing, the battle belongs to the Lord. Verse 37, David told Saul, the Lord will deliver me. Verse 47, David told Goliath, the battle belongs to the Lord. Hey guys, if you're a Christian, if you're not a Christian, I want to encourage you to become a Christian because this is what Christians believe. This will make a difference in your life. You can be changed. You don't have to live in fear. You can live in faith. You can live in victory. We as Christians believe in a God who created all things. You understand that, right? We think God made it all. We believe in a God who is always in control of all things. There's not one thing that's happening in my life or your life without God's permission. We believe in a God who is able to direct the course of our lives and everything that's happening in the universe. David believed that. Hey, you've got to believe that because there are going to be things that happen in your marriage where you're going to have to believe that there's a God who's on your side because you're not going to be able to fix it yourself. If you could fix it yourself, you would have already done that. You need God. There's going to be times you're going to face health issues. You're going to have cancer. You're going to have a kid with cancer. You're going to have a spouse with cancer. And there's going to be a situation where you just can't deal with it yourself. There's nothing you can do about it. If you could do something, you would, but you can't. You need God. There's going to be things that happen with your own children where you look at those little children that you have, those little children playing out here in the playground, those little children, as they grow up, things are going to happen in their lives. They're going to break their hearts. They're going to break your heart. And when those things happen, you have to believe that there's a God who is on your side or you're going to lose your mind. Things are going to happen in your career that aren't even your fault. There are going to be people who don't like you, who come against you, who undercut you, and it's not going to be your fault, but your career is going to be wounded. You're going to be injured in your business, and you haven't done anything wrong, and you've got to believe that there's a God who's on your side. Some of you are fighting addiction. You're in recovery right now. It's all you can do to hang on for one more day. You have to believe that there is a God who is on your side. The battle doesn't actually belong to you. The battle belongs to the Lord. When we sing these songs, I tell you this every time we sing it. We sing that song, I Speak Jesus, and I'm looking around the room, and I know the stories of some of the people in the room, and I can see them closing their eyes and raising their hands and singing these songs with all their hearts. I speak Jesus for my family, and I think about what I do for a living. I prayed this week for a man who's having a heart procedure. I prayed this week for a couple who wants to conceive a child. I prayed this week for a lady whose husband is going to heaven. I prayed for a man in his 20s who has an inoperable brain tumor connected with our church. I prayed for a couple whose marriage is on the brink. And then I pray for myself and my own inner struggles and my own battle with my own past and my own children. And listen, I'm gonna do all that I can. You should do all that you can do. But there's a point at which I've done everything that I can do and everything that I know to do, and I can't go any further, and I still need help. That's why you have to believe that the battle belongs to the Lord. You have to believe that the battle belongs to the Lord. Hey, number 2 on your notes. David's courage came from his trust in the Lord. His courage came from his trust in the Lord. So one of the things you see when you see this text is you go, wow, David was a brave guy because Saul, this big, tall, strong king, he's afraid of the giant. All these guys in the army, including Eliab, David's oldest brother, they're all afraid of the giant and the Philistines. But how is it that the youngest kid out there who's too young to be in the army, how is it that he's the only one who's willing to go fight? Well, his courage comes from his trust in the Lord. Your courage doesn't come from hyping yourself up, okay? Getting in your car on your way to that cancer surgery and playing some kind of hype music on your radio, that doesn't do one thing to do with your cancer. The battle belongs to the Lord, and your courage can't come from some hype music. The courage has to come from your trust in God. Your courage can't come from positive thinking. Your courage has to come because you trust in the Lord. See, all that other stuff is artificial. It doesn't mean anything. But there really is a God who really is in heaven, and he really can do something about your situation. And if the battle belongs to him, your courage will come because you trust him. The more you trust him, the more courage you will have. And you can see that courage coming out in 3 important conversations that David had. One of the conversations in this story that we just talked about is you can see it in verse 26, 27, and 28. There was this conversation that David had with the soldiers and with Eliab. So David the kid comes out of the sheep pen in the morning. He gets up, leaves the sheep. He goes to the battle lines, and when he gets there, he hears Goliath come out and defy the armies of God. And so David begins to ask, how come nobody's going to fight him? Well, look at him. Nobody wants to fight him. What will someone get if they do go fight him? Isn't that kind of an arrogant question? What are you going to get if you actually fight him? And they said, well, I mean, you're going to get rich and you get to marry the king's daughter and your family will never have to pay taxes again. That's pretty good. Really? All I have to do is go fight that guy and I'm going to be rich and I don't marry the king. I get to marry the king's daughter and my family never pays taxes again. All I got to do is beat that guy. That's all you got to do. I love it that David's already thinking about the reward on the other side. He's already thinking about what's on the other side of the battle. And as a Christian, if you're a believer in Jesus, let me tell you something. You should always be thinking about what's on the other side. What is God going to do as a result of this challenge that you're facing? When God comes through on the other side of the battle, what is on the other side for you? What is the upside of all this? And here's what's great. If you believe in Jesus, crucified on the cross and raised from the dead, then no matter what happens, you know you win, because even if you die, you go to heaven. You got to be thinking about the reward on the other side. And if the reward on the other side of death is heaven, then that means there's literally nothing that anyone can take from you that really matters. Because on the other side, you got life forever with Jesus in heaven. And that's what David says, what am I going to get when I do this? Second conversation, he has this conversation with Saul. And my favorite part about the conversation with Saul, there's two parts of this. One, I noticed in verse 36, David says, listen, when I'm keeping sheep out there, I know, because Saul's kind of like, look, Goliath has been in the army since he was your age. This morning you were keeping sheep. You're just a shepherd. You can't fight a professional soldier. And David says, well, shepherds fight too. You know, it's dangerous out there. I've had to fight lions and bears. Now, I don't know if David's kind of exaggerating for effect, but he said, if a lion takes a sheep, he grabs him by the beard and kills him. Like Tarzan or something. I mean, it's unbelievable. So David's just saying, I've had experiences out there. I have fought, and God has preserved me all of these times. You know what I like about that? Hey, check this out, Christians. Some of you are new to this, so you're just learning this. Some have been doing this a long time. I hope you'll know this. One of the ways that God works in your life to build your courage is he comes through for you. And what happens is, God comes through for you and you pray for something and you're in a challenge and you pray and you fight and you struggle and God prevails on your behalf. That's like a lion or a bear. In your mind, when that happens, you get healed, you overcome something, you get that promotion, your kid comes through, your marriage comes through. It's almost like you take the head of that lion, put it back there behind your desk. And then every time when you need God to come through for you and you're afraid he's not gonna do it, go, well, I got the head of that lion back here. God came through that time. I bet God will come through this time. And then you pray and you're praying for something that's going on in the life of your little kid because they've got a learning disability and they're having a hard time making friends, and you pray and you bring them to church and you get other people praying and you figure it out and you kind of work your way through it. And they come out kind of on the other side. They get to a better place. You say, see that? That's a bear. That's a bear. That's the head of a bear behind my desk. And every time when I face a challenge from now on the rest of my life, I'm gonna look back and I'm gonna go, well, there's the head of the lion and there's the head of the bear. I think God can take care of the giant. That's the way that faith works. Lions and bears. You've walked through cancer. Kristen and I think about the things, Kristen, that are in our lives. Walk through turmoil growing up with family. Walk through cancer. Walk through some things with our own kids. Walk through some things with our marriage. Walk through some things with our finances. Walk through some things with our church family. All that are lions and bears stacked up so that the next time I face a giant, boy, that's scary. I don't know if I can take him. I probably can't. I need God to come through. How am I gonna know God's gonna come through? Lion, 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 bear, bear. But you know what? God comes through. It's okay. So when you face giants, you don't go into the fetal position because the God who helped you kill the lions and the bears can take on Goliath. The third conversation, this conversation with Goliath, Goliath comes out there and says, I'm gonna kill you, man. I got a shield so big, I have to have a whole dude just to carry the shield for me. I got a sword, it's gigantic. I got a spear, it's gigantic. Like, I am going to slaughter you. And David says, you have a sword, I have God. Let's see what happens. And I know sometimes you're gonna feel like your boss has all the power. You're gonna feel like there's nothing you can do because social media is so powerful in the lives of your children. You're gonna look out there and you're gonna think the powers of this world are so strong. I want you to know All of them can come at you with whatever they want. If you're a believer in Jesus, you have God. Let them come out at you with whatever they want. You have God. You have God. And I like what David says. David says there's a purpose for this. So one of the reasons that people are not able to think about their challenges and their fights the right way is because you don't understand what the purpose of it is. David did. David said, the purpose of this fight, the reason that I'm gonna beat Goliath, the reason that God's gonna let that happen is because when Goliath falls, the whole world's gonna talk about it. They're all gonna know that my God is stronger than his God. And all of Israel that's afraid right now, when they see Goliath fall, they're gonna remember how great God is. So I'm gonna let God, when God works through me, he's gonna build my faith, he's gonna build the name of God around the world, and he's gonna remind the people of God how great God is. That's what happens in your life. Think about your marriage. If you have a good marriage, it's a delight and a joy. The longer you stay in your marriage and fight for your marriage, the more confident you are you can make it. And when you realize that your marriage actually tells the world and your kids and each other a story about God that's true, then you understand that your marriage actually has a greater purpose, even greater than your own personal happiness. Think about your career. A good career is a delight and a joy. The longer you stay at your work, the more wins you rack up, the more confident you are you can succeed in this business. And if you realize that a Christian working hard with integrity and skill and a great attitude is telling a story to the world and to God's people, then you understand that your work actually has greater purpose than your own personal wealth building or your own personal satisfaction. Think about your family. A good relationship with your children, if you have them, is a delight and a joy. The longer you work at your parenting, the more confident you'll get in how to discipline them, how to engage with them, how to encourage them, how to stay in relationship with them. But when you realize that fighting for the relationship with your kids and repenting when you need to and forgiving when you need to and loving them and staying in the game no matter what, when you realize that all that tells us true story about God to the world and to other Christians, then you realize that even your own family has a greater purpose than your own personal satisfaction. David understood that. You know what else I liked about the conversation that David had with Saul? I've mentioned it a couple times. Did you see where David says to Saul? Saul says, hey, you can't go fight him. He's a professional soldier. And David says, well, you know, Saul, I used to keep sheep, verse 34. I used to keep sheep. When was that, David? I was way back this morning. This morning, that's when I used to keep them. I used to keep sheep. You know what I love about David? David knew that this moment was so big, he wasn't gonna keep sheep anymore. That wasn't gonna be what he was gonna do anymore. He's either gonna be dead or he was gonna be the victor. And if he wins, he's marrying the king's daughter, he's gonna be rich, his family doesn't pay tax. He's not keeping sheep ever again. I used to keep sheep this morning when I got up. But I'm done keeping sheep. I love David's confidence in God. I love it. David woke up as a shepherd boy that when the prophet Samuel came to his house, David wasn't even invited to the barbecue. David started the day being ridiculed by his oldest brother in front of all of these soldiers. But David went to bed as the second most powerful man in all of Israel. By the time the day was over, he has Goliath's armor in his tent and Goliath's head in his hand. And he's engaged to the princess. And all the women in Israel are writing songs about him. He wakes up in the morning as an anonymous shepherd boy nobody's ever heard of. And he goes to bed the most famous and powerful man in all of Israel, destined to be the king, and everybody knows it. I bet his brothers didn't make fun of him anymore. Kind of reminds me, some of you guys who know, if you know, you know, there's a guy named Toby Keith who wrote a great song several years ago. How do you like me now? How do you like me now? And I imagine David playing that for his brothers. Number 3, you must trust that the Lord fights for you. You must trust that the Lord fights for you. Verse 33, David goes in to meet with Saul, and Saul says, look, you cannot fight this guy. And David's response, verse 37, I'm not gonna be the one doing the fighting. You can't fight this, it's okay. I'm not actually the one doing the fighting. You can't fight successfully in your marriage. You can't fight successfully for your kids. You can't fight successfully against your cancer. You can't fight successfully against your financial issues. You can't fight successfully against your depression or your addiction. It's okay. You're not actually the one doing the fighting. The battle is the Lord's. God's doing it. We sing this song from time to time. When I fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, The battle belongs to you. Do you believe that? See, if you're a Christian, you should. The New Testament says it this way. St. Paul said, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. St. Paul says, therefore, take up the whole armor of God, not the armor like Goliath, the armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Last point on your notes, number 4 from this text. I want you to see this. You should let Jesus be your champion. You should let Jesus be your champion. If you're here today and you've never received Jesus, you should receive Jesus by faith. So let me tell you why I like this. So how many of you guys have ever played a sport? Would you please raise your hand if you've ever played a sport? Okay. How many of you guys have ever been in a sport? I want you to raise your, how many of you guys have ever been in a sports, an athletic context where they brought in like a motivational speaker or a chaplain or somebody to come give like a talk before you went to play? Anybody ever been in that context? Raise your hand high so everybody can see. Don't be ashamed. Okay, good. So when I was a kid and I played football, they would bring in the chaplain before the game. And if they ever brought in the chaplain into the football locker room and he opened up to 1 Samuel chapter 17 and started reading the story of David and Goliath, you knew the coach thought we were about to get whooped. These guys would come in the locker room and try to tell me the story of David and Goliath like that was gonna fire me up. Are you kidding me? That's like one of the greatest miracles in all of history. You're saying we need the greatest miracle in all of history to win tonight. Thanks a lot. Sometimes we think of ourselves as David fighting giants. We see ourselves in the story. I'm fighting the giant. I need to win against the giant, and that's important. We can definitely learn about David's faith and courage. We can learn from him. But I think also we should consider that sometimes in the story we're actually more like Saul, disobeying God, not facing up to our responsibilities, letting people down, choosing fear over faith. The truth is, a lot of times we're more like Saul than we are like David. But you know who I think we should really identify with in the story? Not really Saul so much, David so much. I think we should see ourselves much more like the armies of Israel. We know that we're facing a giant and opponents that we really aren't able to fight by ourselves. The Philistines were more numerous than the Israelites at this time. The Philistines were more technologically advanced than the Israelites at this time. There was no way they should be able to fight the Philistines. And we know we face giants that we can't face on our own. We face sin, we face the devil, we face the whole world, we face our own mortality. We face the judgment of God, we face death, we face our own inner demons, we face our own failures, and we know that we just can't win in all of these arenas. We need a champion. And then here comes Jesus from out of the ranks, a place you didn't see him coming from. And some people are making fun of him and saying that he can't do it. And some people are trying to put clothes on him that don't fit him. And Jesus steps onto the field of battle, and in an unexpected way, Jesus takes the giant down and he cuts off his head. He takes out sin, he takes out death, he takes out the devil, he takes out judgment. Jesus is the true champion, the one who stands between. He stands between us and sin, between us and judgment, between us and hell. Jesus crucified on the cross, raised from the dead. He is the one who stands between. He's the champion that we need. And he did it all at the cross. He did it all at the empty tomb. Jesus is the real hero of our story, and he's the hero of our families, and he's the hero of this church. He's the hero.